The Galactic Council Chamber, a grand hall of towering columns and shimmering holographic displays, was alive with the murmurs of countless alien representatives. The West Chamber was filled with the scents of various atmospheres, the glow of bioluminescent skin, and the rustling of ceremonial robes. At the center, seated upon the high dais, High Chancellor of the Zenith Dominion clicked his clawed fingers impatiently against the arm of his chair. The council had convened to welcome a new species into the fold, a rare occurrence, but not unprecedented. Yet, this species was different. The Terrans had risen too quickly, expanding from their home system in mere centuries, and now they were here, demanding recognition among the great powers of the galaxy. The massive chamber doors opened with a deep, mechanical hum. The murmurs died instantly. The humans entered with a deliberate, controlled pace, their steps measured, their expressions unreadable. And like the flowing robes or extravagant armor of other species, the Terrans wore sleek, dark uniforms, minimalist, functional, almost predatory. At the head of the delegation was Admiral Elias Carter, a man whose every movement exuded calm authority. His sharp eyes, blue and piercing, scanned the room as though he were assessing the battlefield before a decisive strike. Behind him, several other human representatives followed, their postures rigid, their gazes unwavering. For a brief moment, silence hung over the chamber. Then, a soft whisper from a diplomat broke the quiet. "They do not look like diplomats." Leaned forward, his golden reptilian eyes narrowing as Carter stepped toward the central podium. The Terran admiral carried no ceremonial staff, wore no decorative insignia beyond the modest emblem of his republic. He did not bow, as was customary. Instead, he placed a small, unassuming datapad on the polished surface before him and spoke, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable weight. "Before we proceed, I believe it is important that this council understands the reality of the Terran Republic." He tapped the datapad once. The vast holographic display above flickered to life. The images that followed silenced the room in an instant. A battlefield, strewn with the wreckage of Dominion warships. Entire armadas reduced to burning husks, their debris orbiting a lifeless void. Then, footage of ground combat, Dominion warriors, tall and imposing, cut down with brutal efficiency. The feed shifted to grainy footage from a Dominion vessel's security cameras, human soldiers, moving in perfect coordination, their weapons precise, their faces unreadable behind sleek visors. The last image was the most damning. A Zenith Dominion warship, the pride of their navy, burning in the darkness of space as a lone Terran battlecruiser loomed untouched before it. Claws dug into the stone of his seat. He had seen these reports, but seeing them displayed here, before the entire council, stripped him of the ability to deny the truth. He was not the only one disturbed. Gasps of disbelief rippled through the chamber. A Vask ambassador trembled, his bioluminescent tendrils dimming in fear. A warlord clenched his mandibles, his carapace bristling. Even the normally stoic representatives of the collective exchanged wary glances. Carter let the silence stretch, observing their reactions with clinical patience before speaking again. "This is what happened when your Dominion attempted to subjugate us," he said, his tone even, almost conversational. "We were underestimated. We were treated as a species that could be bullied, coerced, brought to heel like so many others before us." He stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "That was a mistake." A growl rumbled from the far side of the chamber as a Dominion general, one of subordinates, rose from his seat, his scaled features twisted in barely restrained fury. "You dare threaten this council?" Carter met the alien's glare without so much as a flinch. "No," he said plainly. "We do not make threats." He gestured to the footage above. "We issue statements of fact." The general's growl faded, but his fists remained clenched. Could feel the fragile balance of power shifting. The Dominion had long held dominance in this chamber through fear and strength. But now, the humans had pulled back the curtain. The Terran Republic had not come here to plead for recognition. They had come to inform the galaxy that they were already here. A deep, guttural voice rumbled through the silence. It came from the delegation, an elden of their species, known for their long lifespans and calculated neutrality in galactic affairs. What is it that the Terran Republic seeks? Carter inclined his head slightly, a flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, crossing his face. We seek coexistence, trade, diplomacy. He let the words hang in the air before adding, we seek peace. He let the faintest hint of steel enter his voice. But we are prepared for war. The chamber remained silent. The weight of the unspoken truth pressed upon them all. The Terran Republic was not a rising power to be guided or manipulated. It was already a force to be reckoned with. The question now was not whether humanity belonged in the Galactic Council. It was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to accept what that truly meant. Exhaled slowly, his pride warring with his instincts. The Zenith Dominion had ruled through strength for generations. Now, for the first time in history, he felt the presence of something stronger. The Council will deliberate on your inclusion, he said finally, his voice carefully measured. You will have our decision soon. Carter nodded, seemingly. Take all the time you need, he said with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. We are patient. As the humans turned and strode from the chamber, their exit as deliberate as their entrance, realized something unsettling. The Terran Republic had not come here to ask for a place among them. They had come to claim it. And from the way the Council now sat in uneasy silence, it was clear that humanity had already won this battle without ever firing a shot. The Terran Republic's diplomatic vessel drifted silently in high orbit above a neutral trade world, its sleek, angular design standing in stark contrast to the ornate and elaborate ships of the other galactic delegations. Inside the command chamber, Admiral Elias Carter stood at the center of a minimalist briefing room, his hands resting lightly on the edge of a, displaying shifting tactical readouts. Across from him sat a delegation from the Zenith Dominion, their rigid postures betraying barely contained hostility. High Chancellor was not present this time. Instead, his place was taken by a diplomat, envoy, a wiry figure whose deep purple robes bore the sigils of the Dominion's highest ruling houses. He sat with forced composure, flanked by two towering Dominion warriors clad in ceremonial armor, their golden eyes fixed on the humans with barely concealed disdain. Carter let the silence stretch between them, watching as, shifted ever so slightly in discomfort. The Dominion had called for this meeting, an unusual step given their usual preference for unilateral demands. That alone was telling. Finally, the alien envoy cleared his throat and spoke. The Zenith Dominion acknowledges the unexpected military capability of the Terran Republic. His voice was clipped, measured, each word carefully chosen. We recognize that our previous assessments of your species were incomplete. Carter's lips twitched in something that might have been amusement. Incomplete is a generous way to describe it, he said, his tone neutral. He tapped the, and new images replaced the tactical readouts, footage from a recent skirmish between a Dominion patrol fleet and a single Terran task force. The Dominion's warships, outnumbering the human fleet 3-1, had been dismantled in mere minutes. Terran vessels, smaller but faster, had danced between them with terrifying precision, striking where the Dominion ships were weakest. The final image lingered on the screen. An entire Dominion battleship, its hull breached, its engines dead, left to drift helplessly. The humans had not even bothered to finish it off. They had simply left it there as a message. Exhaled sharply through his nostrils, his jaw tightening. We do not wish for continued hostilities. The words sounded forced, foreign on his tongue. War between our nations would be costly. Carter tilted his head slightly. You came here to talk about cost. He folded his arms behind his back, pacing slowly. I imagine it's more costly to replace an entire fleet than it is to build one. He gestured toward the footage. Tell me, how many ships has the Dominion lost trying to subjugate a species you once called primitive? The Dominion envoy stiffened, his claws twitching against the polished surface of the table. "We miscalculated," he admitted grudgingly. "That is why we are here. The High Chancellor has authorized me to open negotiations for a formal ceasefire." Carter exchanged a glance with the other human representatives in the room, Ambassador Helen Park and General Marcus Steele. The three shared an unspoken understanding. This was not an act of diplomacy from the Dominion. It was an act of survival. Park, ever the diplomat, leaned forward, her fingers steepled. "A ceasefire," she repeated thoughtfully. "That implies an end to open conflict but not necessarily a resolution." Gaze flicked to her. "It is a first step," he said carefully. "A necessary one." Carter studied the alien envoy, the rigid set of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. The Dominion was not accustomed to being in this position. Their entire empire was built on the foundation that they were the dominant force in the galaxy, the ultimate authority. That illusion had been shattered. Now, they were grasping at the remnants of their pride, trying to salvage what they could before the humans decided they were no longer necessary. Carter leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "The problem, envoy, is that a ceasefire suggests we are equals in this conflict." He gestured toward the footage once more. "Are we?" Claws dug into the fabric of his robes, his golden eyes narrowing. "You are powerful, Terran," he said, his voice quieter now, edged with something Carter recognized, resentment, perhaps even fear. "But power alone does not make one superior." Carter met his gaze evenly. "No," he agreed. "But how you use that power does." He straightened, clasping his hands behind his back once more. "Tell me, what would your Dominion have done if you had been the ones standing where we stand now?" Hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. That was answer enough. Steele, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "You would have burned us," he said bluntly. "You would have taken our worlds, enslaved our people, and ground our civilization into dust. That's what the Dominion does, isn't it?" Silence spoke volumes. Carter exhaled softly. "You're right about one thing, though," he continued. "We're not like you. If we were, this war would already be over, and the Dominion would be nothing but a footnote in history." He let that statement settle before gesturing to Park. "We'll consider your ceasefire proposal. But know this, humanity does not forget. We remember who fired the first shots. And we remember who came here, today, asking for mercy." Jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "I will relay your words to the High Chancellor." He stood, his warriors rising with him. "I hope, for the sake of both our people, that wisdom prevails." Carter watched as the Dominion envoy turned and strode toward the exit. Just before stepping through the doors, hesitated, casting one final glance over his shoulder. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held the weight of a realization he had not spoken aloud. That the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. And there was no going back. As the doors slid shut behind him, Steele let out a quiet chuckle. "They're scared." Carter nodded, his gaze lingering on the doorway. "They should be." The Dominion outpost had once been a symbol of their unwavering control, a fortress built to remind lesser species of their place. Now, it was a ruin. Smoke billowed from shattered defense towers, and the walls lay in jagged pieces across the barren landscape. Bodies of Dominion warriors were strewn across the battlefield, their golden eyes vacant, their armor cracked and torn. Overhead, human dropships hovered in tight formations, their engines thrumming as they unloaded more troops onto the scarred train. The battle had ended hours ago, but the work was not yet finished. Captain Ryan Carter stepped over the lifeless form of a fallen Dominion officer, his rifle resting against his shoulder as he surveyed the aftermath. His team moved with methodical precision, sweeping through the ruins, checking for survivors, securing intelligence caches. There was no celebration, no sense of triumph, only efficiency. They had fought, they had won, and now they ensured their enemy would not rise again. He watched as a Dominion soldier, barely alive, tried to reach for a weapon with trembling fingers. A single shot rang out, and the movement ceased. Corporal Vasquez, standing a few feet away, lowered her sidearm without a word. No hesitation. No mercy. A voice crackled over Carter's calm. "Captain, we've secured the command bunker. You'll want to see this." Carter exchanged a glance with Vasquez before moving toward the bunker's entrance, stepping over rubble and discarded weapons. The heavy blessed door had been breached with precise charges, leaving jagged scorch marks along the frame. Inside, the Dominion war room was in disarray. Holographic displays flickered erratically, showing tactical maps, casualty reports, and distress signals that would never be answered. Dominion officers lay slumped over consoles, their bodies stiffening in death. Sergeant Darnell stood near the central, his expression grim. "We found their final ordnance," he said, gesturing toward a terminal. Carter approached and scanned the data. Ordnance from the High Command, issued in the final moments of the battle. No retreat, no surrender. They were to hold the outpost at all costs. Carter exhaled slowly. The Dominion had believed, even in their last moments, that they could outlast the humans. That stubborn arrogance had cost them everything. Vasquez scoffed as she read over his shoulder. "They really thought we'd just stop." She shook her head. "They still don't understand what they're dealing with." Carter tapped a command into the console, pulling up additional data logs. Communications records, intercepted transmissions, internal reports. One report in particular caught his attention, an analysis of human combat effectiveness. He read through it quickly, his expression unreadable. Darnell frowned. "What is it?" Carter glanced at him. "They studied us," he murmured. "Tried to quantify what makes us dangerous." He gestured to the screen. "Their analysts couldn't understand why we fight the way we do. Why we don't break like the others." Vasquez smirked. "I could have told them that for free." Carter didn't smile. He scrolled further through the report, pausing at a highlighted section. "Listen to this," he said, reading aloud. "Human soldiers exhibit a disturbing resilience in combat. They do not flee when faced with overwhelming odds. They do not surrender even when death is inevitable. Psychological operations have proven ineffective. Their capacity for sustained aggression far exceeds our projections. It is unclear whether this is a product of their biology or their culture, but the result is the same. They fight as though they have nothing to lose." A heavy silence settled over the room. Darnell exhaled sharply. "They thought we'd break," he muttered. "Like everyone else they've conquered." Carter nodded. "And now they know we won't." The calm crackled again. "Captain, enemy reinforcements detected inbound. Small force, but they're coming in fast." Carter straightened. "Positions. Now." The team moved without hesitation, exiting the bunker and taking up defensive positions among the rubble. The distant roar of the Dominion gunships grew louder. Carter crouched behind a broken wall, his rifle steady, eyes scanning the sky. They could have retreated, could have let the reinforcements land, fight their way through the wreckage, and waste more Dominion lives. But that wasn't the way humanity fought. Vasquez grinned, checking her ammo. "Think they'll stick around when they see what's left of their buddies?" Carter smirked faintly. "Let's find out." The first Dominion gunship descended, its side hatches opening to reveal soldiers in pristine armor, weapons raised. They expected to land in an outpost still held by their forces. They expected to find their comrades waiting. Instead, they found only humans. Carter gave the signal. The first shots rang out, precise and unrelenting. The Dominion soldiers barely had time to react before they were cut down, their gunship riddled with fire, engines bursting into flame. It spiraled out of control, crashing into the remains of a communications tower. The second gunship hesitated, wavering midair as its pilot took in the scene below. A moment later, it turned sharply and fled. Vasquez let out a short laugh. "Smart choice." Carter stood slowly, lowering his rifle. "They're learning." He watched as the damaged gunship wreck burned, casting flickering shadows over the battlefield. But it's too late. Darnell exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Aeordans, Captain. Carter glanced up at the sky, at the world beyond where the Dominion's empire still loomed, still clinging to its illusions of power. But that power was crumbling, and humanity would be the ones to finish what the Dominion had started. He looked at his team, at the hardened and shaken expressions of soldiers who had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer and had not faltered. Pack up, he said finally. We move to the next target. The Dominion was a sight unlike any other, a sprawling metropolis of towering citadels and endless skylines, once the beating heart of an empire that had ruled the stars for centuries. Now, it was a graveyard. Smoke curled into the sky from burning wreckage, the streets littered with shattered bodies and broken war machines. The banners of the Dominion, symbols of its supposed eternal rule, hung in tatters from ruined buildings, torn by both human hands and the chaos of battle. What little resistance remained had either surrendered or lay lifeless where they had made their final stand. The Terran Republic's forces moved methodically, securing the last strongholds with grim efficiency, their presence a stark declaration. This war was over, and humanity had won. General Elias Mercer stood at the edge of the Grand Spire, the former command center of the Dominion's High Command. It was an impressive structure, built from black material that gleamed even through the layers of ash and soot now settling over the city. The High Council chambers within had been cleared hours ago, their leaders dragged from their thrones, their fates decided in the span of seconds. Some had begged. Some had tried to fight. In the end, it had made no difference. Mercer had seen it all before. He had fought in every major campaign since humanity had been forced into this war, had witnessed firsthand the brutality of the Dominion, the way they crushed weaker civilizations beneath their heel without hesitation. And now, they had learned what it meant to be on the other side. A transmission crackled in his ear, a report from one of his lieutenants. General, all sectors secured. The last Dominion forces have either surrendered or been eliminated. No further resistance. Mercer nodded slightly, though his expression remained unreadable. And the civilians. There was a pause on the other end before the lieutenant responded. Scared. Confused. Some still think their fleet is coming to save them. Mercer exhaled through his nose. They won't. He turned his gaze skyward, where the Dominion fleet had made its last stand. Now, only the wreckage of their warships remained, drifting lifelessly in orbit, a silent testament to the futility of their resistance. The Dominion had ruled through fear, through overwhelming strength. They had believed humanity was just another species to be conquered, another civilization to be broken and bent to their will. They had underestimated them. Footsteps approached from behind. Colonel Sloan, one of Mercer's most trusted officers, stepped forward, her armor still streaked with alien blood, her expression as hard as ever. Interrogations are complete, she said. The ones who knew anything useful are dead. The rest are too broken to be of any use. Mercer wasn't surprised. The Dominion had never prepared for a scenario where they lost. Their leaders had fought until the last possible moment, refusing to accept the reality that their empire had crumbled around them. By the time they realized their mistake, it had been far too late. Sloan continued, her tone measured. There are still Dominion civilians unaccounted for. Scattered pockets and underground, hiding. They won't last long without support. Mercer turned, his gaze steady. And Sloan hesitated, then exhaled. Aeordans. For a long moment, Mercer said nothing. He looked back over the city, at the burning remains of what had once been the center of galactic power, and considered the weight of history pressing down upon them. The Dominion had never shown mercy. They had never spared a world, never hesitated to turn an entire species into a footnote of history. If humanity had lost, there would be no discussion, no debate, Earth would have burned, and every last human would have been exterminated or enslaved. He knew that. Every soldier who had fought in this war knew that. And yet, here they stood, victorious, with the power to decide what came next. The war is over, Mercer said at last, his voice calm but firm. The killing ends here. Sloane studied him for a moment, then nodded. And then stood. I'll relay the orders. She hesitated briefly before adding, some of the men won't like it. They don't have to like it, Mercer replied. They just have to follow it. Sloane nodded once more before turning and walking away, leaving Mercer alone at the precipice of the shattered Dominion capita. Far below, in the streets, human soldiers moved with calculated precision, securing the last remnants of the city. Above, the sky remained dark with smoke and the debris of a fallen empire. In the distance, the last remaining Dominion ships, transports, not warships, were preparing to leave, carrying with them the few survivors who would live to tell the tale of what had happened here. They would spread the story across the stars, a warning to anyone who might when they think to challenge humanity. Mercer closed his eyes for a brief moment, listening to the distant echoes of battle fading into silence. Humanity had not wanted this war. They had never sought conquest, had never asked for bloodshed. But they had been given no choice. The Dominion had forced their hand, believing themselves to be superior, believing that humanity could be broken like all the others. They had been wrong. As the last Dominion transport lifted off, disappearing into the black void of space, Mercer turned away from the ruined cityscope and activated his calm. Prepare the fleet for departure, he ordered. We're done here.